Hey, this is Sandy.
And Randy.
And we're here on AT Corner.
Being an athlete trainer comes with ups and downs, and we're here to showcase it all.
Join us as we share our world in sports medicine.
Welcome back to another episode of AT Corner. For this week's episode, we have a very exciting co-host story episode on a sport that I feel has gained a lot of popularity, at least within the last decade just alone.
Well, I feel like the Olympics also did a really good job of showing, and just the
Big
sevens, time. Which I learned in the last hour of talking to Megan, that there's two different sides, the sevens, not two different sides, but two different
subtypes.
Elements? Yeah. Types of rugby, play styles, maybe?
Yeah, for sure. So as you can tell, since we are not the rugby experts or have a lot of experience
we
with
don't
rugby.
know the first thing about rugby, so we are not qualified to talk about this topic.
Yes, we brought in a resident rugby expert.
There you go.
In Meghan McKay. She is currently the head of medical for the Houston SaberCats, which is a founding team of Major League Rugby. She just finished her 7th season, by the way. Fun fact.
So that's men's 15s professional rugby, but she's also worked with women's 15s USA Rugby. I'll let her do the rest of her introducing because she goes into like what got her into it and really the nitty gritty parts of rugby and even the most obvious things that we did not know before this episode. And hopefully that if you're interested in working rugby, if you've worked rugby, or if that's something that you might never do but just want to hear about rugby, this episode's for you. So like we said, there's a lot in this episode, but I'm going to let Megan talk and share her favorite memory to kick us off.
Oh, that was a tough one to pick. Rugby has a lot of unique traditions. They do a jersey presentation, so they select someone to come in and present the jersey because there's 23 men on the field or women on the field if you're playing 15s, and you have to earn that spot every week. So it's kind of a big deal. It's just the team in there, and they invite someone in to do a jersey presentation. And it's usually not medical staff or team manager or people like that, but I was asked to present the jersey, and it also happened to be one of my athletes' 50th cap match. So, and he was with me from the beginning of the team.
Oh, how cool.
He was like one of the original players. So that was really meaningful for me, was to be able to not only present to the whole team and kind of tell my story with the team, having been with the team since the inception, but also to present him his jersey for his 50th cap. So that was really cool. And then on the flip side, post-match, if you win, they do a song that's unique to their team, and they all sing it together, and then water and things are thrown in the locker room, and it's like a big celebration. And they found out it was my 50th cap, which I'm not a player. I don't have to earn my jersey. So I wasn't really paying attention to that. But one of the other athletic trainers had asked me to count them up, and it was my 50th cap. And they brought me in the middle of that with two of the other guys who got their first cap. And so we were in the middle of that whole locker room celebration. So those two moments, I'd say, were probably my top two because, you know, it is great getting players back on the field and, you know, these other experiences with injuries, but those cultural experiences with the team are unique to rugby. And so those are kind of my top two. They were kind of tied. So I had to say both of them.
Wow, that's really cool. And look at that. We just started and I already learned so much. Didn't know any of that existed. So that's really cool. It kind of gave me chills.
Honestly, I was just about to say, like, I'm over here, like I have chills over here.
That seems really special. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. It's really, really neat moment.
So I did ask on our Instagram polls this week if our listeners have ever worked rugby, and we got actually 52% of people said yes, and 48% of people said no. So we were almost at that half-half.
Yeah.
But something that I noticed, and something that you and I were talking about too, Megan, before this, is that there's just such a difference in rugby versus some other sports. I did have one person, Aubrie J, who said, I have a new love for rugby. I've always had the idea that it was very similar to football, so I kind of came in working it thinking it was like football. They're very different, even in comparison to injuries. It was definitely something I was guilty of until seeing 7s versus 15s. I think 15s is what most people imagine rugby being related to football. 7 versus 7 is fall, 15 versus 15 is spring. It's a completely different game. The pace is different, but not a whole lot, I would say, changes from an AT/injury perspective. Sevens is a much shorter game and almost no stoppage for the entire game. That's when I would say it could be more, quote, stressful for an AT because there's so much going on. My advice: trust in your skills, refer when you're certain you cannot rule out fracture, or when you have a concern of a concussion. Refs are very supportive of concussion protocol and will support you. Bizarre injuries happen all the time, and it can have you questioning what you're seeing. Learn the rules and ask questions to ensure you're able to remove a player without penalty. A lot of times you're doing an eval from the sideline when the play is not over, or you're evaluating on the field while the play continues around you if a player is down. I did not have a rotation where I learned rugby. I just started working per diem through a clinic, and they cover a lot of rugby, so I learned a lot from my supervisor. She then connected me with a college team that needed an AT. I asked the players what works for them as far as tape and tricks go because there's so many.
Yeah, that's really a really nice wrap up of the differences between the two. I work primarily 15s rugby union, and it is very, very different. Sevens is very short. It's usually tournament style because the matches are so short. You can do multiple in a day. And so it's very different. The one thing that is true for rugby is they don't stop play unless it's pretty serious or there's a natural stoppage, like the ball goes out, there's a penalty, something like that. So you have to learn how to enter the field of play while play is going on, to assess that player. And then there's substitution rules for rugby. Once you're subbed out, there's no re-entering the match. And then the coaches have limited number of substitutions on top of that. So you can't just sub people because you're not sure. She mentioned sideline evaluations. That's only happening at like collegiate club and lower levels. Those are not happening at professional or international level. You're evaluating on field. So like listening to you guys on field episode was kind of funny because, you know, a lot of times you guys are like, I never do function on field. That's all I do on field because I have to decide, can you play or not, rule out emergent things or, you know, deformity, that kind of stuff. And then are you functional? And it's a quick boom, let's cut to the chase, because if you're not functional, then you're coming off. So yeah, so it's a good wrap up that she mentioned about that. You know, I recommend if anybody's first starting out to like hop onto, I don't know if I'm allowed to plug this, but the World Rugby site has free online education modules that you can take.
Oh, that's really cool.
So you can learn about the game, like you can learn the rules of the game, but then there's also a whole medical track. So you can learn that stuff. They also offer courses regionally that you can attend. So, you know, first aid in rugby, emergency, you know, immediate care in rugby, that kind of thing. So it's a really good course to help you learn how to apply your medical background to the sport because it's very sport specific.
Wow, that is such a cool resource.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's really cool that their world organization like offers that. That's really dope.
Yeah, I mean the courses and the certifications, obviously you have to pay to go to that course, and that's more limited, and they're only offered so often in so many cities. But the online education part, if you sign up and you're looking online, you can learn that stuff and take those courses.
How did you get into rugby?
I grew up watching it. I had a Welsh grandparent that lived in the household with us since the time I was 6. So he was basically like a third parent. So I watched cricket and rugby and stuff like that. And then I actually quit working in university athletics and got a job in outreach hospital setting. And we found out USA Rugby was coming to town to play an international match. We just reached out. We're like, hey, can we help support the team while they're here? And then from there, I've been involved ever since. So, you know, we heard that MLR was beginning a new professional league. Again, just some internet sleuthing, found out who was who, got a meeting, you know, and kind of got into it that way on the medical side. So, you know, when USA came for that first match, like 10 years ago, they happened to be hosting one of those courses I mentioned. So we got into that course. So I've been certified for level 2 since then. So for 10 years. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it. Just, you know, a lot of business development opportunity sleuthing when I was working outreach, you know, trying to find a new avenue for our hospital clinic.
Yeah, you know, it's crazy, like the differences that you were talking about. Like I would never do functional on the field. I mean, unless it's like baseball, softball, because again, like it depends on the substitution rule, like where you are in the game too. But the biggest thing that I was noticing when people were messaging was like, you just have to know how to be on the play or be on
Yeah.
the field while the play is still happening.
That's
and that just
crazy.
like, that's just blowing my mind.
That's crazy to me. So, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
You learn, you learn as you go. I'm hoping to do a presentation soon on this. But I haven't heard, so I can't talk about it. But I'm hoping to get some like footage of like our viewpoint on the field. So, in football, you guys talked about that too, like where you stand in football.
Mm-hmm.
Are you at the ball?
Mm-hmm.
Are you behind the ball? In rugby, someone actually did kind of a little case report on it in one of the tournaments on like where to stand in rugby. Cool. And it's very different from football. So essentially, no matter who's on offense or defense, you want to stand on the offensive side. And, the field's pretty wide too. So it's going to depend on if you have one person covering the whole field for both teams, or if you have two people like we do in our professional level sport. We have two people on the sideline. But essentially, there's a certain way that you stand so you can constantly see into the rucks or the contacts. And then the ball, because the ball's moving backwards, right? It's not moving forward all the time, because that's a turnover if the ball's moving forward, unless it's kicked. So it's just a very different way of standing, but you want to stand where you can see into the contact all the time. But, one group might have gone into contact. They're still on the ground. The ball's already moved to the next pod, we call it. Then it's moving again, but you still have to watch to make sure everybody's getting up from all these pods. So, and it can move really quickly too. If there's a turnover, all of a sudden you're sprinting down while you're scanning back behind you to make sure everyone's getting up and coming along. So, you just kind of learn as you go. It's helpful to get a mentor. Like she said, her supervisor who'd been working rugby really helped her talk to the athletes and the coaches. They're really want you to do it well, because if you don't do it well, you can interrupt their game. So, or you can get hurt yourself. That's happened before to people. So, yeah. So I would just, if you're by yourself, talk to your athletes and your coaches, and they'll kind of help you figure that out. And the referees, especially not in the professional level, like in the lower levels, if you go meet them in your medical timeout, that kind of thing, and just say, hey man, I'm new to this. Like you just wave me on, like they'll help guide you a lot, because they know a lot of athletic trainers only work at PRN or something like that. And so they know that they don't really know the sport.
Right.
So, but you just learn.
I'm still stuck on the idea that you said one person covering both sides.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. When I first started, it was that way because, it was a startup league. It was like the MLS year one. You know what I mean? We just didn't have the staffing and the finances and the rules yet. So the first couple seasons I was by myself, and it's pretty brutal because the field is huge. It's bigger than a soccer field. So it's a lot.
I could imagine.
It's a lot.
My gosh.
Yeah. I don't run because I'm not a runner, but on average I put in from the medical timeout, which is a half hour before kickoff, to the end of the match, I put in about 4 miles.
Wow. Holy smokes.
Yeah. That's an average. It depends on the field. Some are not regulation size here in the US and that kind of thing. It depends on how fast the game's going or not, but that's about the average.
That actually kind of leads into this one from Colby T. He says, be prepared to cover 7 to 12 miles per game of movement, which is an internal study Megan and I were looking into. Don't be surprised having play happen around you and literally have to lay on top to protect athletes during play, as action does not stop unless severe. If it's obviously severe enough to the official, unconsciousness being the most common, they will stop play. But like said, it has to be like blatantly obvious that the emergency care is needed to take place for them to stop. Medical rarely makes the decision to stop the match, as it could be seen as an unfair advantage to the other team to halt play in a sense, or give up a scoring opportunity due to a minor injury.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah. So, excuse me. So in our league, we can't enter the field of play when a team is in the attacking 22, because if a guy goes down, he's like, oh, my shoulder, and I go into play while the other team's trying to score, that could be seen as interference for that. So like Colby said, unless it's this guy is out cold on the field and we need to protect the player, they're not going to stop. So in that instance, you just have to wait and be like, you're going to have to wait a minute. So, or if the play moves on and it goes the other way, or if someone gets it out of bounds or they call down a penalty for a scrum or something like that, then you can go in. But if it's still moving and the game is still going, you're not going in.
Wow. That's interesting. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. That's like,
I don't know where Colby got 7 to 12 miles though, because my field's bigger than anybody's field, and I was averaging like 4. So I don't know what he was doing.
Oh, I think he was talking about the. Is he talking about?
Oh, it must be the athletes, I guess he was saying. I don't know. It sounded like he referenced, because him and I were doing a pilot study on like physio, like what we put in, because we're not just sitting on a golf cart at a soccer game or on the sideline at football, just moving 20 yards back and forth or whatever. So we were curious, and there was no research out there, so we were kind of piloting that.
That would be a pretty cool study, actually.
Yeah, I don't know, we might still publish it, but there's a small data point and all that's what we'll see. We're still talking about it.
I like it. That'd be cool to do, like all the sports, baseball, softball, you're just gonna sit in one spot.
Yeah, I was gonna say volleyball last night. It wasn't much movement at all.
Until you switch sides.
Where you have the score table.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sometimes they stick you at the score table and you're just sat there the whole time. So yeah, it's very different. I'm moving.
Right. Someone said be creative, since you aren't allowed to brace. Using only tape can be a challenge. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yes. So the way that they tackle and play is very, I don't know how to explain it. It's like a cross between tackling and wrestling. Like they're very much on each other all the time. So bracing can be very, like knee bracing, that kind of stuff can injure other players like much more than it could in like football, that kind of thing, especially because the play is always moving. There's not stoppage all the time. Right. So yeah, there's no bracing. There's a few things you can get away with, like maybe a small thumb spica that's not, that's padded or something that's not very bulky, but like the casting you guys talked about with football, that's not happening. No one's casting for play in rugby. And very few of them will even wear like a soft ankle brace even. So you're taping everything. So when we get students for their immersion, that's usually the first thing we're doing. Like way back when I took the BOC, I had a knee taping, like an MCL or something. I was thinking to myself, like, when am I ever going to do this? And here I am, I do it every day. Like, you know what I mean? Like fast forward 20 years, it's like every day I'm doing this. Shoulders are the same way. We do a lot of strapping for the shoulder. And it's very individual based on the players too, because, I know, Sandy, you were talking about football, like you love how unique each player has a different role. And in rugby, it's very similar to that. They very much have their own role in the sport. And so they have to have different levels of mobility based on that. So yeah, it's very individualized on how you're doing it. And like, I'll make things up. I'll be like, what do you feel is wrong with this? Or where's your pain level, or where is this restriction feeling? And we'll make it up on the fly. How does this feel? If this isn't right, great, let's try this tomorrow until we get it right. So sometimes I just make things up. And my students are like, oh, where'd you learn that? I'm like, I just made that up. So I'm like, you just have to think of the anatomy and the physiology, and break it down to that, and talk to your athlete and figure it out from there. So like, what are you functionally trying to achieve? And how do I get it to be that way with this type of tape?
Yeah, that's what I would always tell the students. Like, if you know your anatomy, like you pretty much got almost every tape job down. Like you could figure it out.
You got to figure out what's got to stop and what it's got to help.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And then like us, we live in Houston. It's hot and humid. So some tapes just aren't going to cut the mustard. Like, you do anything with white tape, it's coming off in like 2 minutes. So, you know what I mean? Unless it's an ankle or something, we're not really using that at all.
Right. So speaking of tape, the next thing that I asked on our Instagram was, what is a must in your kit when you work rugby? And before I share some of these, I want to know what your thoughts are.
Okay, so I thought about this ahead of time because I knew you were going to ask, and it's 6 things: gloves, gauze, 3-inch stretch, Luco tape, electrical tape or insulation tape. If you have international players, that's what they'll call it, and sticky spray.
Ooh, sticky spray. Okay.
If you have those 6 things for match play, you're going to be fine. Everything else can be taken care of in the locker room at halftime or after the game. Practice, obviously, I'll carry a little bit more just because we have the time and they can come out of drills. But if it's a match, like, you really only need those 6 things.
Okay. That's
I might
simple
add in
enough.
like electrolyte stuff, which every athlete talks about. But if you're doing your nutrition right and
Mhm.
your training right,
Right.
from
Yeah.
like
Right.
a neural response, you shouldn't need a lot of that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Being
Right.
affected.
So Anna K says, wear gloves constantly. Be prepared to work faster than you've ever worked. Other must-haves:
Yep.
sponges for head wounds and nubbins, electrical tape for securing head bandages and securing nubbins.
Nubbins, that's a new one. I get a lot of words for different boo-boos and injuries from
I
my
asked.
internationally diverse group, but I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know what a nubbin is.
Wait, let me look real quick because I did ask. I was like, I don't know what a nubbin is. I said, what is a nubbin? She said, it's the little piece that the flyers tape to their knees for lineouts.
Oh, that we just call that a lifting block.
Oh, yeah. Someone else said the same thing. They said electrical tape for leg wedges,
Lifters.
I think.
Yeah, leg wedges. So in rugby, if you watch it, like there's two ways to re-enter the ball.
Uh-huh.
It's with a line out, which is, it's not like a soccer throw, but we'll call it that.
Okay.
So the guy that stands on the sideline, like his feet have to be touching the line,
Mhm.
throws the ball in, and both teams are lined up, and it's very strategic. So they have a lot of different calls on where they're going to throw the ball,
Mhm.
and they'll lift a guy in the air to catch the ball. And we're talking, so my team, I've got a 6'7" lock being lifted by another guy who's like 6'5", or another two guys who are 6'5". So they tape around their thighs, and they'll use like a line out block or a nubbin, I've just learned it's called also. And they'll use those to have somewhere to like grab on the front of their thigh. And so it's a sport specific thing. Wide receivers, they need gloves. Line out jumpers need lifters. So, so that's why I have 3-inch stretch, because that's like the best tape for that.
Cool.
And then electrical, they'll go above and below that lifting block to make sure that stays where they want it. A lot of the time, some of them do. That's also a very individual thing. Like each athlete tapes his legs a certain way, and they've got their own kind of lifting blocks. One of my guys won't use like pre-made lifting blocks. He'll like get the empty 3-inch stretch rolls and like bend them a certain way and use that as a block, which I'm like, great, thanks for recycling that in a different way. So I always throw my ends for him.
Nice.
He knows where to go get his ends. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
By far, the most answered must have, I guess, is gloves and gauze. Like by far, everyone said gloves and gauze. They said there's gonna be blood everywhere. Electrical tape was definitely second.
That's funny.
And then the next few, it was kind of like a tie between Powerflex AFD, just like getting like having the little gauze on the Powerflex, and then Leukotape, Steri strips, and Vaseline, which all kind of have to do with that blood and wound care. Another blood wound care, blood buster, and cleaning spray. And then we had a couple ones that weren't as popular, just some runners up: Tooth Saver, Sam Splints, and Slings.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. You have to have all of your emergency equipment. Like I do give presentations on emergency action planning, medical timeouts, and then like on field care. And part of the reason is because I've done so many. Like I've had doctors joke I'm like Black Cloud, like they'll work events with me and see things they've never seen in their entire careers before.
Oh no.
Things like that. Like I had to spine board a lumbar spine injury before. There was no other way to get them off.
Right.
So here we go. We're gonna board you and take you to a secondary exam off field. So so those things are must haves, like obviously, but like I think I answered by way of like typical, like I'm reaching into my on person pack rather than my field kit, if that makes sense.
So then are you carrying a lot more in your on field since you're doing a lot more on field? Or is
no, I carry those
gauze?
things I mentioned, and then I carry OPAs and MPAs. That's it. That's pretty much all I have on me. Well, that's not true. I'll have skin lube and nose plugs, because those I need to have those too. Because usually I stick those. Usually I pre-lube a nose plug and wrap it in 2 gauze, stick that in one of my gloves, and then I'll have just regular gauze in the other glove. Because you're wearing them constantly. Right. So, so I'll have that kind of stuff on there. But I don't have a very large field pack because I don't need it during the match. Like if I need anything else, they're already coming off anyway.
Right.
And then they're just going to go get an exam by the doc or wait till post match.
Nice.
What do you use Leukotape for? Because Leukotape was pretty popular.
Everything.
I was gonna say
I love Leukotape, but
yeah,
but I don't know too many other people who do.
But that's what when she was talking about the white tape just falling off, I was just like, oh, that's a Leuko right there.
Yeah, I mean, for us, because we're in a humid environment like subtropical heat and humidity, it comes in handy for that. Like even the Leukotape comes off sometimes, which I remember in school being told never put it on the skin, and that's a lie. I don't know who came up with that, but I don't know. We use it for everything. We use it for our knees. We'll use it for shoulders. We'll use it for thumbs. We'll use it for, any like collateral ligament restrictive taping, whether it's an elbow or whatever. But the thing is too, overseas, they don't have white athletic tape readily available because they don't have athletic training. So a lot of them have Leukotape available because that is the higher demand. So it's actually a lot cheaper over there. It's kind of flipped for supply and demand internationally. It's a lot cheaper to get Leukotape and they call it rigid tape because it is more rigid than white tape. Right. So if you ever work with a random international athlete and they're like, oh, I usually get my ankles done in rigid tape or brown tape. That's what they'll call it. So
that's an intense ankle.
Their expectation is more that it's that they don't understand how expensive it is here and how, less available it is. It'll be on back order sometimes and things like that. So yeah. But we use it for everything. We'll fix boots with it too, which I don't like doing, but I'd rather them use electrical tape for that, but I'll just tell them to get new boots finally.
For the boots, like, do they have specific like rugby boots or like, are they just kind of like, like soccer boots or like anything like that?
They do. They're harder to get here in the US. But they do. Yeah, they do. The backs are much more like soccer players. They want like the smallest boots possible. They're kicking a lot as well as like quick running movement. And then the forwards, the forwards and particularly the props, like they're doing scrummaging, which is really hard on their toes and their feet. So they want a bulkier boot. So some of them will wear a football boot if they can't find it. Okay. Like a rugby boot. But usually, I mean, I've worked a lot of club and stuff, but it's been a while now since I have, because I've been with my professional team for 7 years now. But I don't really remember at club level what they're wearing. Okay. So I'd have to defer to a club level expert on that. But my guys are typically in their rugby boots. And then like their scrummaging boots are different than their regular boots because they have like much longer metal studs for match player scrums. Okay. Just because the amount of force that goes through, they can't wear just the little plastics. They'll slide right out from under them.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So like at practice, if they're going to go do scrummaging, they all sit down, change their shoes.
Okay. That's pretty funny.
Man, the things you like have no idea of other sports.
Seriously. It's really cool just to see just how each sport is unique and just like the different culture and like vibe. It's really cool.
Yeah, 100%. That's one thing I love about this job, right? Like we never know what our day is going to be like. And then you never know where your career is going to end up and all of that. So it's great.
Oh, that gave me chills too.
I know, right?
I never thought I'd be working in professional rugby and, had a medical of a team for this long and that kind of stuff when I was first starting out. So it's cool,
It's funny where the road takes you.
Yeah. You just have to be open to opportunities, kids.
That's so true.
Absolutely.
So true.
So let's talk injuries.
Ooh, fun.
So I did ask what is the most common injury that you've seen in rugby. Obviously, it was very varied. Lacerations and blood, open wounds were, especially the face, were the top answer, followed by concussions, which was also interesting because some people were very adamant that concussions were one of their top injuries. And then some people were like, I actually see fewer concussions because of the tackling techniques and stuff. So it was kind of like back and forth between that, but it was a top injury. AC joint sprains, shoulder dislocations, followed by ankle sprains and knee injuries.
Yeah, so I would say everything, literally everything, head to toe. I think the concussion debate is a good one. I think it depends on the level of ability of your players.
That
so
makes sense.
That's what I was thinking too.
It's just like middle school football. I will never work middle school football.
Yeah,
Like that makes me more nervous than working a professional rugby match from like
absolutely
a catastrophic injury standpoint. You know what I mean? Like their skill isn't there. You got one kid that's 180 pounds, another kid that's 80 pounds. It's a whole thing. So I think for that, I would potentially look at like the ability of like, you know, are they a Division I club? Are they Division II? Have they played before? Is it a beer league where it's a bunch of old dudes coming up with, you know, their coolers every weekend? That kind of stuff can really vary. Like I've seen very interesting things on the club side. So, yeah, for us, I don't think it's been, I mean, this past season we had quite a few, but typically we don't have a lot. Knock on wood. Touch wood right now.
From Kevin, we have a cool one from Kevin. He says, I think having an athlete get his ear ripped off his head wins me the prize this week. So I'm evaluating another athlete for an ankle injury. He comes up, hey, I think I might have a concussion because it's hard to hear out of my one ear. I didn't look up. I just said, okay, hold tight. You're next. Finished with the ankle and he was kind of facing away from me. So I said, okay, tell me what's going on. He turns and faces me and his ear is hanging off his head. He did not even realize it. Turns out he was in a scrum and someone reached up to pull him and grabbed his ear. This is why they tape their ears. Turns out he got to the field late and just forgot to. I wrapped him in gauze and pointed him towards the ambulances we had there. It was a huge tournament. Also, that was my first ever PRN event I had worked after I was certified.
Oh my gosh. Welcome to the profession.
Yeah, seriously.
Which ripped ears was actually also pretty common.
That's interesting.
Do you not get a lot of those?
The facial lacerations is definitely valid. Like,
okay.
We get a lot of that. It's kind of like boxing. Your face just splits open when you get a lot of contact to things, or you're tackling shoulders or things like that. Occasionally you'll get a boot flying where it shouldn't fly. And you'll get cut that way. I had a guy get a really good one. He had like a puncture right above his eyebrow, and then the other cleat like basically followed his entire part down the center of his head. He had quite a few stitches that match, and he was not happy. Because that's very rare for like a boot to be that high up.
Yeah.
It should have been a red card at the time, but we won't talk about that. So, you know, we'll get a lot of that stuff. You know, the thing with rugby, you get everything. So like the day-to-day practice stuff, you'll get your sprains, strains, all that kind of stuff. AC sprains are definitely common, but pretty much any catastrophic injury that can happen in rugby, which is why I think those courses are so great.
For sure.
I mean, I've had really rare injuries too. Like I've had a Rolando's fracture of a thumb. I had a guy go out and he was like holding his thumb, and if they need you to come out, like this is the other thing, opposite of soccer. Cause also, you know, you guys are talking about flops in soccer. That does not happen in rugby. If they need you, they take a knee, and that indicates to everyone they need you out there. So if they take a knee, you know, you need to look at them, and they are not doing that casually. Right? They're not just winded or whatever. So
you don't play rugby to just take a knee.
Yeah, they don't do that. So I went out there and I was like, what's going on? He was like, my thumb. So I was palpating and I got to the base of his thumb, just the base of the metacarpal, and it like crumbled in my hands.
Oh.
And I was like, you fractured your thumb. And he was like, no, it's fine. I can play. And I was like, no, like it's fractured in multiple places. Right. You need to come off. Because he was also the guy that throws the ball in, right? Which is fun fact. That guy's called the hooker.
Oh,
okay.
So that it crumbled in my hand, and he's like, "No, I'm fine. He got up and ran back into play. So play starts back up.
Okay.
Like I can't like physically take him off the field. So I just run back off the field. I radio the coaches like, "Hey, he's out. Like we need a sub. It's a red. Get the next guy ready." And he's like, "But he's playing." I said, "The minute he touches a rugby ball, he's done. Promise." Like, and sure enough, like 2 plays happened. He didn't have touched the ball, and then the ball went out of bounds, and he had to throw it in, and it went like sideways. And then he just turned around and walked straight to me. He's like, yeah, I'm done. So, and it was like crazy. And like once I got him the hand surgeon for imaging and all that, he's like, this is 1% of all thumb injuries.
Holy crap.
Oh my gosh.
And so he had, he had to have surgery, had to have it repaired, and he still played after that, like after it healed. But it was like, it literally like crumbled in my palpation. That was a good one. I had a really rare direct axillary nerve injury. So typically when you have like a direct blow to the axillary nerve, the shoulder dislocates. So the guy takes a knee. I get out there to the field, and he's like, Megan, I dislocated my shoulder. So I'm like, okay, palpate his shoulder. I'm like, it's not dislocated, man. Like, this is in place. Like, because if it was, I would just pop it back in. He was like, no, it's dislocated. I was like, guy, like, it's not dislocated. Like, my hands are on your shoulder. It's fine. So I'm like palpating around. And so I just go into functional testing, and it just wasn't right. So I was like, just come off. He's like, yeah, it's dislocated. And so he went to the doc. Doc's like, this is not dislocated. Your shoulder's fine. But it turns out he had the direct blow of the axillary nerve. He ended up having deltoid atrophy. He ended up having to have a distal tricep axillary nerve transfer surgery, which wasn't even available 7 years ago. There was like only 2 surgeons in the country that could do the surgery. And he came back to play after that, and it was really cool. But it's super rare because usually the axillary nerve gets injured, the shoulder dislocates too. So like every surgeon he saw was like, you're sure this shoulder didn't dislocate? We're like, yes, we promise. We got all the imaging. Like his shoulder MRI was like clean, no inflammation, nothing. It was all axillary nerve. So that was an interesting one. This last season we had a scapular fracture.
Oh, interesting.
And it was not that painful. It was the body of the scapula, and it just was like from a direct contact blow to like the top of the shoulder.
How did that present?
He was just like, my shoulder hurts, but it's like my back. And there was no deformity or anything like that. So we had to pick it up on imaging. He wasn't even that like limited functionally, but he's just like, something's wrong. Turns out he had a scapular fracture, and it was, kind of up by the coracoid process, not the body actually. It was up there, but it wasn't all the way through. It wasn't displaced. So yeah, it was pretty interesting. That was a rare one too.
So did they sling him, or was there?
Yeah, I mean, he was limited. He was in a sling, but I mean, as long as he wasn't like elevating to get into that coracoid motion up there, it was fine. So like he was limited to like 30 degrees motion, I think.
Okay.
At first, and then he was back. I think he played. I think we cleared him for match play like 5 weeks later. So yeah, I think he only missed 4 or 5 matches.
Okay.
Cool.
So yeah, that was an interesting one too. I'd never seen one of those. So
Randy, do you want to read this one from Josh B?
Yes, Josh says, player got his face stepped on. Ouch. Cleated and had his tragus, little ear notch, torn almost clean off. There was so much blood, and it was my first game as a student. I thought his eardrum ruptured. He was bleeding out so much that it pulled in his ear that he could not hear out of that side. I believe initially we used non-sterile gauze to take up the excess blood, then drained it out of his ear onto the field. We then slapped some non-adherent gauze and light plast around his head to go for stitches. We made him go to the hospital and not the bars, as was his plan. The game we actually had a few we had to send to the hospital. A couple sets of stitches and 1 drop kick blocked by the crotch. Whew. Well, see, that's a bummer. The plan was ruined. He was going to go to the bar.
I mean, club rugby is different. And actually even our professional league, it's a very cultural thing with rugby. There's a post-match social afterwards. So even at like international and professional level, both the teams come together and have beers and food, and they usually give each other like the man of the match award or something like that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So, I forget what the saying is, like, it's a game of barbarians played by gentlemen, like, cause they don't, you know what I mean? Like, it's a barbaric game, but then they come together like, hey man, like, how are you doing afterwards? And then it's not like hockey or basketball. They don't talk to the refs poorly.
That's nice.
Yeah. So like you can get carded if you're cussing at the ref. So, they have the most polite arguments ever on the field. It's funny.
A lot
But
of
yeah,
people.
so I could see that he'd be bummed not to go to the post-match social. So that's,
for sure.
That's definitely part of the experience. But yeah, it's interesting.
We did get a lot of people messaging about the socials, and I had no clue what they were talking about. But
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Also, I love how first game as a student. Look at that. Learning opportunities.
Yeah, I was working a club, like a collegiate club game, and I had a PM&R resident who was interested in sports med, and so she was shadowing or coming to help work because she wanted to do a sports fellowship. So obviously she needs experience for that application, and it was her first time working with me, and I was working for a university that's like kind of nerdy, and they were playing this like really beefy farm town college from across the state, and this kid just got sandwiched between the ground and this very large guy, and he ended up with a clavicle fracture, a scapular fracture, and a pneumo. And
shoot.
she came running over, and she could just tell it was serious, and she was just like, what do I do? Like, even though she's a resident physician, she was like, just tell me what to do. She was like, I'm out of my comfort zone here. And I was like, take vitals, call 911. I'll manage the actual arm itself. So, called EMS, the whole deal. But she went on to be an attending sports PM&R.
Oh, I love that.
So,
that's awesome.
She was like, thanks for getting me through that first day. So, yeah, that was her first day.
You're like, this is so beyond what I'm used to.
But she did great, because some doctors will come in and be like, oh, I can pretend to handle this.
Yeah.
And she was just like, just tell me what to do, because this is out of what I was expecting today.
Right.
That's really good self-awareness, because that's true. Like some doctors might come in like that, like just come in with that certain energy. So that's pretty cool.
I'm a doctor, I can handle this. But she was like, no, this is not anything I've ever trained for. So I'm gonna see what she needs.
I've learned that everyone says like fake it till you make it, fake it till you make it, and I think there's value in that, but also there's value in accepting what you don't know and being vulnerable enough to ask.
Yeah.
/ brave enough to ask.
In talking about rugby, we've talked about that already. Like, ask your athletes, ask the coaches, talk to the referees, like let them know where you are with the sport, because it is so unique to other sports. You're not just sitting on the sideline, like you're an active part of the match. So letting them know, like, hey man, this is my third match. Like, what do you guys need from me? This is my comfort level. Do you have this on site? And that's where those medical timeouts are so important for every event, whether it's your 90th match with the team or whatever, the other athletic trainers are not, like, that's why those are so important, because even things like that can help. What are their expectations of you, and vice versa.
Right.
Yeah.
We have another one from Anna K. She said she has a horizontal fracture of the patella after being tackled from behind. It was not originally completely fractured all the way through, but the athlete stood up while trying to keep her still, and it snapped with the first step. Top half shot a quarter way up the quad. Immediate surgery to approximate the ends. She was returning from ACL tear the year prior to.
Oh,
dang.
I kind of actually had a similar situation recently. We had a player that had a partial patellar tendon rupture, surgical repair, got him back to play, first match back to play. He just had like this weird tackle and kind of got like helicoptered around, so to speak. Like his legs came up off the ground and like he spun around and he landed right on his patella and fractured his tunnel.
Ooh.
From the patellar tendon repair. It just fractured the patella.
Wow.
We were like, what? And he played for like another 10 minutes or something on it.
Wow.
And then was like, I don't know, it's just not right. And he came off, but then didn't come see us post-match, because usually like if they have any injury, they come see us post-match. Came in 2 days later for the exit medical, and his patella was fractured in half. And I was like, what? You've been like walking around? He's like, well, I haven't been walking that much. But like, I knew something was wrong. And I was like, why didn't you see us like right then?
Right.
Like, he just never, I think he thought it was his patellar tendon and not the patella. I don't know. But I was just like, what are you doing, man? He like walked around for 2 days with that. That's rugby right there.
Yeah.
They do stuff like that. And you're like, what? Like, how is this possible?
Right.
And they usually call me on Sunday if it's something more serious. They'll be like, hey Meg, like, I got to see you tomorrow morning. This is what's going on. And so, I don't know. It was interesting. I was like, I can't believe you just didn't even tell us. You just walked in like that.
Right.
Like, I literally palpated his patella and I was like, we need x-ray. And then I got my student. I was like, you got to feel this. And the doc just looked at me and I was like, was like, it's fractured. So,
Wow.
sure enough, all the way through.
Wow.
I had someone take a baseball pitch straight to the kneecap and he was fine.
Oh, that's impressive.
And
I mean, it doesn't
lucky.
usually fracture like that. Like, it's a pretty strong bone. The way
Right.
it's shaped, it doesn't typically fracture. So it's impressive when they do.
Right.
sure.
Right.
That's great. I bet it hurt.
Yeah,
I
he
bet
collapsed
swelling
pretty
was not
quick. Yeah.
fun.
You know what? He actually also didn't swell. So I was like,
Oh,
Oh,
how
that's interesting too.
I mean, I only say it was a visiting athlete, so
Yeah.
I only saw him like right as it happened.
Oh, yeah.
I compressed him in case later, but
Yeah.
like I have no idea how he's going to stiffen up, but I was surprised it didn't just like balloon up right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, or at least bone bruising the next couple, that
Right.
probably hurt for a bit.
Right.
That's impressive though. Like taking balls like that is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We have an anonymous one. An athlete lost a whole tooth. Both teams helped us look for it after the game.
That's nice.
Oh, that's cute.
I guess
See,
right
that's
before the
rugby.
social, right?
Yep.
They help each other out like
Yeah.
that.
For sure, yeah.
Most of the time. There's sometimes they don't, but most of the time they do.
Yeah, we get like in football where like our AD will come down and be like, we are not shaking their hands. Make sure to keep them apart. We are not going to go over to that other side. Make sure that they're always separated after the game. Make sure everyone knows.
No way, man. You got to be good sports.
I know, seriously. You just
It's.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say you spent all that time beating the hell out of each other.
Yeah, but it's a respect thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's what they're there to do. That's your
Mhm.
job, right?
Mhm.
You've signed up to do that, whether you're a professional athlete or youth. Like, you've committed to performing that piece of things. So you just respect the other person for giving it their all. And,
For sure.
Have you found that respect is kind of throughout the different levels, or is it like a culture thing?
Yeah, very much is. It's very similar to lacrosse in that way. Like,
Oh, okay.
once you're, once you're a lax person, you're a lax person. Everybody kind of respects you for
Mhm.
that. Rugby's
Mhm.
very similar to that. It's very much like a rugby culture thing. Like, once you're in it, and you're part of it, and that respect is there. So that's one of the things I love about it too. Like, and now that I've been in the league so long, I've got players that play on almost every other team now. So post match, when everybody comes in and shakes hands, like, I'll, hey, how's it going? How's your daughter's 3 now? Like, we'll have those kind of chats at post match and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's really nice. That's one of the things I enjoy about it. And every morning they come in, everybody comes and says good morning.
Oh,
So
that's
whether
awesome.
it's a handshake, a fist bump, a hug, like, I've got one guy who comes in and gives me a big hug every morning. It's really nice to just have that interaction, because in a normal athletic training room setting, you might not see them until you get out to practice. You know what I mean? But in our space, everybody's kind of in the same space. Everybody sees everybody that day. You can immediately say, oh, that guy's not here today. What's going on, coach? You know what I mean? So it's a little bit more family feeling.
How
That's
many
awesome.
people are on a like team, and does it change? Like, if you're actually, follow-up question, do the same people play 7s and 15s, or like you only work 15s, right?
I only work 15s. Athletes can cross over between those two sports. It's typically, it's not every kind of athlete. It's typically your backs that are crossing over. Some of like your forwards, like your 7s and 8s, some of them will cross over to 15s as well. I mean 7s, but usually they're just playing the one version at a time. So like, I've had guys that came from 7s, they played 15s for a year or two, and then they've gone back to 7s. Usually they'll have a preference, and it'll just depend, like, logistically why they're playing which one or the other, or professional goal wise. If I want to make the Olympics, it has to be 7s, because 15s is not in the Olympics, but 7s is. I don't know if you guys follow Alona Meyer now, because everybody seems to after the Olympics. So there is some crossover there, but not a ton.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask that, especially after, the Olympics, I feel like rugby has grown a lot more popular, probably in the last decade, even probably sooner. And then I think that Olympic performance is only going to make it a little bit more popular in the US. How much have you seen the game just change? Like, just from like maybe resources available, or even just popularity over the years?
I've definitely seen it grow from starting with our team, you know, because it's a national league. So we come and play in LA and San Diego, Seattle, you know, Boston, areas like that. So, you know, from year one to last season, like definitely people stop us in the airport more often. They're like,
Wow.
oh, you guys are on the shuttle bus, you know, to the parking at the airport. They're like, are you guys with the rugby team? I saw the logo. So that never happened the first couple seasons. You know what I mean? So like just from an anecdotal standpoint, I can see that growth happening. You know, we're a newer league, so it's not totally stable. We've had teams come in and out for franchises, but the core 7 are still there. And we're definitely growing. We see more fans in the stadium. It didn't help we had COVID year 3, so we literally had 5 matches and then it canceled. And then the year after that, half the city still couldn't have fans.
Right.
So that kind of hurt us in terms of league growth right when we were starting out. But in general, it's definitely improved. I think the Olympics did a really good job of showcasing the women's game because the women's rugby has been around for a long time. And they've been very successful. And I just don't think people even knew that women played rugby until all this media attention came on from the Olympics. And I think that has really been great because, you know, they're the same game. It's just, you know, different athletes are playing them. And so it's really exciting. So I think locally we've seen a lot more, like even our team does like off season, we'll do like clinics with youth and programs in the area. And we've had a lot of girls signing up that we didn't have in the previous year. So that's really great to see. You know, and then just from a fan standpoint, it's a fun game. They're fast, they're exciting, whether it's 7s or 15s, even 15s, it's 80 minutes, much like soccer. It's 80 minutes at the halftime. There's not really a stoppage, but you get the contact and collision like you get with football. So it's really exciting to come watch. And everybody's drinking beer and tailgating. And if you sit next to somebody with an accent, they will happily tell you all the rules. You know what I mean? Like they want you as excited about rugby as everybody else. So, so it's really a fun experience on and off the field. So yeah, we're excited with all the attention that the Olympics brought the sport.
I bet.
That's so cool.
Is there a big difference that you've noticed between the men's and women's game?
I did work a bit of women's 15s. Not really. Like I think it just depends on your coaching staff and like what style game that they're running. Mostly. So, you know, obviously men are going to have a little bit bigger hits, a little bit faster because physiologically they are, but the women's game is just as exciting, just as hard hitting, just as fast. Like it, you know, especially when you have like elite high quality rugby. So, you know, they're starting a women's, there is some women's professional rugby in the country. So if you're interested, go check it out. There's a new league starting up as well. So, you know, it's out there. And a lot of these players never played until high school or after. So it's never too late to get into it, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, you know, if you played other sports and still want to be active and try a sport, give rugby a try. That's what they say, because our touchdowns are called tries. So they say give rugby a try.
You know, that is one thing that when I was sorting through these messages, I was like, there are so many things like lineouts. I was like, I have no. So I went and watched a bunch of rugby clips because I've never seen rugby. So like I went and watched a bunch to try to figure out like kind of like the basics of like what even is this other world of a sport that I've heard of, obviously, but never have really delved into. And it just was, I think lineouts was the first one that I had looked up. And so just to see someone be lifted off the floor and like that's part of their play, it was I was like, what is this? This is like a complete new world.
Yeah, that and scrums are really cool. And I mean, I've worked almost every sport in my career, and I think the only one I really haven't worked is ice hockey. But it's so incredible. Those two sport, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, like strategies are really, really interesting to me. And the scrum, just the amount of force that goes through that scrum is incredible. And that there's strategy involved in it, and that the hooker, the guy in the middle and the front, he has to hook the ball through to get possession. And then the lineouts too. Yeah. Like and those are the two most dangerous parts of the game too. So as the AT on the pitch, like I've really got to be paying attention to all parts of that
Mm-hmm.
because, like I said before, I've got a guy that's 6'7" being lifted up by 2 6'5", 6'4"
Right.
guys in the air who's jostling against a defender also lifted in the air by his teammates.
Mm-hmm.
They can be dropped.
Mhm.
You know, contact can happen in the air, things like that. So that can be a potentially very catastrophic situation. Same thing if a scrum collapses, you know,
Mhm.
those props are the three guys in the front. If they collapse and don't collapse properly, you can, you know, snap a neck or something like that.
Mhm.
So they, you know, that's why those guys have to be identified as capable of being in the front prior to the match, like on the roster. Because you can't just put another guy in the front because they don't really know what to do there, and it's
Mhm.
dangerous for them. So yeah, it's really cool, those parts of the sport.
That's cool.
And
That's
I think the kicking part of the sport's underrated too. Like it's very strategic when they kick, how they kick, that kind of
Mhm.
thing. So yeah, I'm glad there's so many out there that have worked it. It was exciting to hear when you said what 52% or something. I was
Mhm.
excited about that. I thought it was going to be less.
You know, I think I know that like when I was working a lot of per diem, like there were a lot of rugby opportunities
Mhm.
that it like I think because of it's not usually associated with like a college or like someone who
Yeah.
has like a permanent AT. It looked like there
Mhm.
was a lot of like per diem, like they're always looking for someone who's not like associated with them, like they're
Yeah.
looking for someone elsewhere, you know.
Yeah,
So I think
100%. Yeah.
the per diem community is really
And I've noticed too, like students are getting a lot more rotations with like club sports at
Mhm.
schools,
Mhm.
and they tend to have rugby. So
Oh, really?
like
Especially in California.
Yeah.
California is the most saturated rugby community in the country.
Oh,
So,
that's interesting.
like if you look at USA Rugby membership across the
Mhm.
country, like they have the most, for sure. They have more clubs. There's more collegiate teams in California. So, especially if you're in California, there's a lot of opportunity there. But, you know, I would challenge any athletic trainer who feels like they need to sharpen their on-field skills a little bit
Mhm.
to sign up and work some rugby because, you know, getting thrown in and having an ear ripped off your first day, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff doesn't happen every day. But
Right.
if you feel like that's an area of your skill set you need to sharpen,
Mhm.
go pick up some rugby shifts because it'll sharpen your on-field skills for sure.
Yeah, there's plenty.
That's
There's
cool.
plenty of per diem
Yeah, I
available.
was gonna say there's
Yeah.
plenty of opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's exciting. It's fun. It's not for everybody. Like,
Uh-huh.
you know, some people would rather work soccer all day. That's not something I think I could do again.
No,
The
thanks.
flopping would kill me. I'd be like, get up. So, or now that you're down, you're coming off.
Right,
So, yeah. So I don't know if I'd have the patience for that anymore now that
Uh-huh.
I've worked rugby for so long. But yeah, it's been good. It's been interesting. It's been good to me. I've seen a lot of random injuries.
Mhm.
You know, like I said, I had a spine board of that lumbar spine. And afterwards, I asked my trauma doc, I was like, did I do the right thing here? Was that too extra? And he's like, no, like that's what you had to do.
Uh-huh.
Like there's no other way to get him off the field.
Right,
I was like,
right.
all right. It's like, okay, thanks for making me feel better about
Yeah.
that one. So I was like, really, like as it was happening, I'm like, really, I can't believe I'm spine boarding a lumbar spine right now.
Right,
Like,
right.
I can't believe it's happening. Because we're on TV and everything, you know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like,
Yeah.
so in the moment I was like, is this really necessary? But it was. So
Did they stop the game for that?
yeah, they have to stop the game for that stuff. So yeah, if it's pretty serious, they'll stop the game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they just stop time. They don't add injury time. They'll just
Mhm.
stop the clock. So, yeah, for stuff like that, they'll stop the game. And we, you know, in like going through our World Rugby stuff, like we all have the same system. So no matter which team you're working with, we all have the same emergency system on like how we handle those injuries.
Okay.
So it's like kind of all hands on deck. Everybody comes in and we just get it done. So
Nice.
yeah, so that's good.
Sweet. Is there anything else you wanted to touch upon or anything that we missed?
I don't think so. I think I just encourage everybody, like I said, to give it a try. And especially if you feel like that's an area of your skill set that you need improving, you'll get that improvement in your skills by working rugby. And even if you don't want to work it as a medic, come out and give it a try. Like come be a fan, like come on out to some of our matches and get into it. Cause it's really exciting sport too. And most athletic trainers, we love sport anyway. So, you know, even if you don't want to work it, that's not your cup of tea, like come on out. Cause it's a fun fan experience too.
Absolutely. I think it's time for us to go watch some rugby now.
I'd be down.
Yeah,
I'd
for sure.
I'd catch the clips during the Olympics.
Oh, yeah?
I did. Caught some
Yeah.
highlights. Didn't actually catch the
Good.
full game.
Yeah, that's sevens though. So you've got to come
Yeah.
check out 15s
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, because
So
I don't think
it's
I've seen
definitely different.
15s. I
Yeah.
think I've only seen 7s.
Yeah, and in sevens they don't really do scrubs and lineouts to the same
Okay.
intensity that we do. They don't have enough players.
Yeah.
Like a scrum is 8 per side and 15s, and they like it's sevens. So
Right.
they do it a
Yeah.
little
Right.
bit different in that sport. Yeah, but yeah, come on out, give rugby a try, everybody.
See,
Heck
like
yeah.
even before this, I wouldn't have known that rugby had two different, like 7s and 15s. Now,
Yeah,
like the next time I see rugby or if I go watch, like I'll be able to be like, oh, this is what we were talking about with 7s, or now I
Yeah.
want to go see 15s, or
Yeah, I had no
Absolutely.
context because I always
Right.
heard of rugby 7s.
Oh,
So
okay.
obviously if they're labeling it 7s, there's another thing. But I was like, I don't know what that other thing is. But now I know.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me on. This was really awesome to have an opportunity to sit and talk rugby for an hour.
No, thank you. I learned a lot. That was really cool. So there was a lot of just learning from this episode, just about rugby in general. But I think this story really like makes me think of my favorite rugby memory, which is when I was a student. We had a club rugby team that when they had games on our campus, they had to have an AT covering. And I guess the AT that they had, like something came up, they couldn't make it. And it was like day of the game, like within 2 hours of the game, the AT wasn't going to make it. So one of their players came into our athletic training room. We're closing up, like we're finishing up, and they're asking anybody, like, can you just cover this game? We'll pay whatever. Our basketball AT, who's been working basketball for years, right? D1 basketball, right? He's now indoor AT basketball guy.
Right.
Was like, all right, I'll do it. So he goes out there and does it. And like, whatever, that like it was an evening game. So we finished up our studying and stuff like that. We were going to start heading home, but we figured, oh, the game's probably still going. And we saw the lights on. So we're like, hey, let's go see how he's doing. So we go down there and we're like, hey, how's it going? And just the look on his eye, he's like, dude, I had this one guy that shouldered he's back out there, dislocation. I already had to put someone in like steri strips. Like just that wide-eyed look. It was just like, not that like obviously he couldn't like obviously handled it. Right. But it's just the
all at once.
Yeah, what the hell is this? This is a war zone. That's always my favorite memory.
That's pretty funny. I didn't know that story.
Yeah. You may remember who it might be because they did our basketball episode. So you could probably just imagine based on that conversation in that episode, just the personality and putting that in rugby. So it worked out really
I love
well.
that. We love Kyle.
He's a good dude.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever handle working rugby. So I commend anyone who is willing to put themselves in that situation. You guys are amazing. Like we said, and like Megan said before, I think one of the biggest things to learn rugby, apart from just like a new sport in general, but like rugby specifically, because there's so much and so many intricacies and so many things, is really having a mentor or a supervisor or someone who you can learn from and know exactly when to go out and, all the what to do beyond the medical care, right? Because the medical care, that part.
Yeah, that's true.
So we do have several types of episodes here on AT Corner. This one was a story episode that we co-hosted with Megan. We also have education episodes that Randy heads. He reads a lot of articles. Thank you so much to AT Chat and Clinically Pressed. They're available for CEU, so make sure you check those out. We also have various topics that we have interviews on, and then we also have other CEU opportunities that you can find in the show notes, especially like MedBridge. There's a code in there for $150 off, so make sure you scroll down, reach out to us, AT Corner Podcast on Instagram, and I think that's all I have.
Yep, that was perfect. Thank you for helping us showcase athletic training behind the tape. Bye.